Konga. Not since King Kong has the screen exploded with such mighty fury. Defying bullets, bombs, rockets, standing 100 feet tall, sending an entire civilization into panic. Konga, in color and spectramation.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I'm gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And today we are taking a look at Konga from 1961.
Konga was directed by John Lemont and produced by Herman Cohen, Nathan Cohen, no relation, and Stuart Levy.
Konga stars Michael Gough as Dr. Charles Decker, Margo Johns as Margaret, Jess Conrad as Bob Kenton, Claire Gordon as Sandra Banks, Austin Trevor as Dean Foster, Jack Watson as Superintendent Brown, George Pastell as Professor Tagore, Vanda Godsell as Mrs. Kenton, Stanley Morgan as Inspector Lawson, Grace Arnold as Miss Barnesdell, Leonard Sachs as John Kenton, Nicholas Bennett as Daniel, Kim Tracy as Mary, Rupert Osborne as Eric Kenton, Waveney Lee as Janet Kenton, John Welsh as Commissioner Garland, and an uncredited Paul Stockman as the larger Konga.
When the movie opens, we find it was filmed in spectramation. And if you're wondering what that is, it really isn't anything. I think it just refers to some of the camera tricks that were going to be performed in lieu of special effects for this movie.
And after the pronouncement of spectramation, we see that we're in a jungle and there's a plane flying overhead, a small passenger plane.
It's a small plane, probably holds 2 people max. And it looks like it's coming in for a landing, but just before it lands, it's engulfed in flames, like a huge fireball. And I suppose it lands that way.
It didn't land, it just exploded.
Right.
It was a crash landing, and we can presume there are no survivors, as does the Radio BBC broadcast that is reporting on this crash.
Right. Apparently the villagers took word to the local news outpost, who got word to London that Dr. Charles Decker and his pilot were killed in this crash.
And Dr. Decker is a famous English botanist.
I mean, I'm sure you have lots of botanists that you admire, maybe some trading cards. Everyone's into botany. So our next piece of exposition comes from a newsboy doing the crying of the headlines in the streets, and he announces that Dr. Decker has been found after a year in Africa.
Yeah, it's 1 year later, and Dr. Decker is doing kind of a press conference.
At the airport.
At the airport. He has a chimp on his lap.
Nobody really notices that at first. It's not referred to in any of their questions.
And he explains how he has crawled from the wreckage and found his way to a primitive village where he was taken in and was able to recover at a fairly quick rate, but decided to stay because of the scientific discoveries that he was discovering.
Well, he was very interested in the local flora, not so much the fauna. They ask if he was a prisoner. He says no, but he was kind of a curiosity. You can imagine why. But after a while, he got to set up a lab and start doing some research there.
And he befriended a witch doctor from this tribe and learned a lot of his science.
So as he cuddles this monkey pretty hard, he tells the reporters that if he can prove conclusively what he learned from the plants in this jungle, they may have to tear up a lot of textbooks. He found a link between plant and animal life. He's going to lecture on that when he returns to his job at Essex College. And he may have made other discoveries, but he's not going to divulge them right now.
One of the reporters finally notices the chimpanzee, and he explains that he has named this chimpanzee Konga, and that he befriended the chimp when it led him to the village.
Yep, and now it has a place in his heart, and he couldn't bear to be parted from him when he left Africa.
So Dr. Charles Decker returns to his home, where we learn that his secretary, assistant, housekeeper, confidant, and good friend Margaret has kept the home going for him in his absence.
Not just the home, but she kept up with his experiments when he was gone. And you can put housekeeper, etc. in air quotes because there's obviously much more to their relationship, as we'll find out later. She was convinced that he didn't die in that crash, so she kept everything going for him back home.
And now that he's back home, he's excited to get back to work, and he explains how Konga will be the first step in a new evolution combining plant and animal life.
This kind of makes Margaret unhappy because he doesn't care at all what happened to her in the past year. Decker just wants her to get a cage ready for Konga.
They make their way to the greenhouse, where he starts to prepare for his new experiments. He begins by trashing the place. He pulls up basically every plant that's already existing because he needs the space for the new plants that he's brought back from Uganda.
Yeah, there's some beautiful flowers there, and he just throws them on the ground. He says we can use those as mulch for his new plants.
And he says he has found plants with human traits from the village witch doctor.
Yeah, that sounds a little suspect. And Margaret's not convinced either. He shows her some plant cuttings and says that these plants are going to grow quickly, but he asks her to turn up the heat in the greenhouse because they need it to be sort of a tropical jungle atmosphere in there.
Right, he needs it to be 90 degrees, and this causes Margaret to need some air, so they agree that they will rest and continue their work tomorrow.
The next day, they're in the lab. Konga is in his little cage, and Decker is creating plant extract from the something that he brought back.
It looked like the asparagus extract that Dr. Fibes was creating.
I thought that too. So apparently what he learned from the witch doctor is that this extract stimulated growth when it was used in the village. The witch doctor also had seeds that he used on his patients to make them docile and obedient. And Decker has some of that as well. And I think he's going to add it to that serum.
And while he's chatting, this potion that he's concocting boils over, and he chastises himself for not paying attention.
You fool.
But alarmingly, Margaret's cat gets into the spilled mixture.
Yeah, we saw the cat when we first got home with Decker. And I guess his name is Tabby. And he's licking up the potion on the floor. Margaret doesn't seem too troubled by this, which she should. I mean, who knows what's in that concoction? But Decker goes nuts.
He goes to his file cabinet and grabs a gun and puts 2 bullets into the head of Tabby.
Margaret is aghast. How could you?
And he explains that it wouldn't be good for his experiments to have a cat the size of a leopard roaming the streets of London.
I think that would be a fantastic movie.
A week goes by. The plants have grown quite a bit, and they eat large chunks of meat.
These plants, some of them look like Venus flytraps, and some of them, I'm sorry to say, look like giant phalluses with tongues. It's a little greenhouse of horror.
Dr. Decker clips a few leaves and says they're ready for his experiment, and he heads back to the laboratory and prepares an injection for Konga.
That poor little monkey.
And with effects similar to Michael Landon turning into a teenage werewolf, the chimp seems to grow.
I don't know if it's that impressive. It's just sort of like a wiping effect where we see different sizes of the chimp kind of wiping into existence. And all of a sudden, he's just a little bigger than he used to be. But Margaret's impressed, and she is fully on board with the mission now.
But it's not all experimentation for Dr. Decker, because he has a job. He goes back to the university, and he is showing films of his class that he had taken while in Uganda. These films show the natives in their habitat, the Bugandas, he calls them.
This film was not shot in Africa. It was shot in Papua New Guinea. And it's kind of funny where he talks about someone creating this fabulous pearl dish, but it's just a clamshell with a pearl lining. So not entirely accurate in any way. But the class is impressed.
One of the students, Sandra, has volunteered to help Dr. Decker in an attempt to advance her studies.
That doesn't make her boyfriend, Bob, happy, because he wanted to go get a coffee with her after class.
Bob is more of a wannabe boyfriend. She doesn't seem to have much time for him because she's so involved with her studies.
And Dr. Decker takes advantage of that. Decker tells Sandra that he's impressed how she's grown in the past year, which is kind of icky. But he's not just referring to her looks, he's referring to her intellect and her drive as well.
Now, Decker's newspaper interview when he first returned has raised some concern amongst the staff of this school.
Some eyebrows, definitely.
So he is called down to the dean's office.
The dean doesn't want him making kooky claims on behalf of the university. It's okay if he says that whatever he's doing is in his private time, but he did mention where he worked, and that is a no-no.
And Decker is angry that they feel this way because his discoveries, if proven true, will be credited to the university, of course.
Yeah, but I don't think the dean's too interested in that. He calls him temporarily deranged from his journey, thinks he needs a rest.
And Decker insists that his work will continue, and the dean says that no, it won't. He kind of pulls rank.
And they really get into a big argument here.
And Decker storms out of the office. Then we cut to the home laboratory, where Konga comes downstairs with a tray of tea.
Yeah, the really high point of his experiments now is he's created a monkey butler.
And Margaret is thrilled, and she rewards him with a banana.
That's such a cliche. She really babies him.
Decker enters, and he's a little cranky from his argument with the dean.
Yes, he's chafing under the dictatorial rule of the dean. He wants to convince him that he's not crazy. So he's got a new serum for Konga.
He inquires whether Margaret has been logging Konga's measurements, and it's very important that the notes are accurate, because now more than ever, he needs this experiment to be successful.
So it's time to inject Konga again, but he doesn't want Margaret there to witness it this time.
No, he asks her to leave so he can be alone with Konga. And the reason for this is because he also put those seeds into the serum this time. So he's going to exert a little mind control over Konga and does not want Margaret aware of this.
So you see the same bad special effects again, where there's a wipe effect, and all of a sudden the chimp has turned into a guy in a gorilla suit. How is that even possible? It's not even the same species. He's talking to Konga, and he's reminding him that they know each other better than the world even suspects. And I was just wondering, what does that mean? That sounds so icky. Again, this guy is such a creep. But while he's doing this, he's hypnotizing Konga with a flashlight, shining it straight into his eyes and telling him that he must obey. You know, remember when you were small and I saved you, blah, blah, blah.
When he's all through that, he calls on Margaret to see what he has done.
Margaret is stunned at this. So I think she's thinking this is a positive because he really somehow managed to take a tiny little chip and turn it into a man-sized gorilla. Asterisk, guy in a gorilla suit. So now it's time for the first test of obedience.
Yeah, the dean is working late that night, and Konga is sneaking around outside his office.
Looking in through the window, he breaks in and starts to throttle the dean, presumably to his death.
Well, it is his death because the next morning his death has made the papers.
Yeah, the newsboy is out crying about this headline. They didn't have Facebook back then.
Now, Scotland Yard has concluded that the murder weapon was an arm, but it can't be that of a human.
They found black hairs on the body, but no animals have been reported missing, like from zoos or private collections.
But they're going to look into that anyway because that's really the only lead that they have.
So Margaret has also read the paper, and she bursts into the greenhouse to confront Decker about this.
Right, she knows that they had that argument, so she accuses Charles of having killed the dean.
Or maybe not killing him himself, but having him killed.
He insists he was nowhere near the dean, and she insists that he was involved. And then he admits what he had done, and then asks her what she's going to do about it.
Yeah, he says we killed Dean Foster, and whether he means Decker and Konga, Decker, Margaret, and Konga, it's kind of all the same. They're all implicated together.
And there's absolutely nothing she can do because her feelings for him are too strong.
She's already taken him for better and for worse in her mind. I don't think that's legally binding. I think she could get out of it if she really wanted to. He says he had to kill someone to prove Konga's strength. So it might as well be the dean who's putting a spanner in the works of his plans.
Yeah, and Margaret wonders why it had to be someone of such high stature. It couldn't have been somebody less important.
But to Decker, humans are the same as rabbits and mice. It doesn't matter who you kill in the name of science.
And he reminds Margaret that she is an accessory, but insists that he will do whatever she wants. And what she wants is for him to marry her.
Yeah, she's tired of pretending to just be the housekeeper and the assistant and secretary. She goes to the parties with him, and she knows that people are whispering about them behind their backs. She doesn't want to be on the down low anymore. She wants to go legit and be Mrs. Dr. Decker.
Well, and also in her defense, she's no spring chicken, and it is the 60s.
She is kind of a horse-faced, very handsome woman, but she's probably not had a lot of offers, and it's now or never in the marriage game for her. Decker agrees, but says that they have to wait till the school term ends because then they'll have time for a honeymoon. And then until that time, don't say anything to anyone about anything. Not their engagement, not who may or may not have been murdered by Konga. Keep it all quiet.
Scotland Yard is continuing their investigation, and they're questioning the dean's secretary. She says that she heard loud and angry voices while Dr. Decker was in the dean's office.
She's very distraught. And after the interview, she leaves, and Decker's out in the waiting room. They're going to talk to him next.
And he explains that they had a difference of opinion, but it was resolved before he left the office.
And the cops want to know what caused the disagreement. And he kind of professor-splains to them that they wouldn't understand. He'd have to get a whiteboard in a laboratory to explain it to them. It's kind of condescending. But one of the detectives says that, well, crime solving is a science as well. So as one scientist to another, why don't you give me your theories as to what happened? And Decker says he has no idea because he deals in life, not death.
That evening, Charles is throwing a party. Is he doing it to celebrate the dean's death? Maybe, but that's not the official reason. We don't really have an official reason. It's just a gathering of...
a reception of some kind. It seems in very poor taste to be holding it right now. And that's all anyone at the party can talk about. Two women are gossiping about the dean's death and, well, who's going to be the next dean?
At this party is Professor Tagore, who is a scientist who is working on similar experiments to those that Dr. Decker is.
He tells Decker he read his report and that he's working along the same lines. And Decker's really interested by this. He suggests a partnership. Tagore's not interested. He wants to keep working on his own lines of experimentation. He's really close to a breakthrough in his mutation growth project.
What's really important is that Tagore is ready to take his work public. And Decker can't have that because he wants the fame and fortune that botany...
that the botanical world will bestow upon him. But he has to be first in order to get that. So Decker reminds Tagore that science should trump the ego, and it's really important to put that first, and suggests that they meet sometime tonight.
Right, they agree to a consultation. Compare notes.
Yeah, Decker wants to tour Tagore's laboratory.
Yeah, to see just how far along he actually is.
So they arrange a science playdate for midnight that night. After the party, Margaret's relaxing. Decker says that she should go to bed. I think he's saying that so that he can leave without being noticed.
Well, the reason he has to leave without being noticed is because he's going to smuggle Konga along with him.
Oh, yeah. I think she might notice that.
So he drives to Tagore's place. He's got a large van.
Like a delivery van.
He unlocks the back of the van before heading to the door. He knocks.
He knocks again. Because I think Tagore was in his laboratory and said he'd have to knock loud to get my attention.
Okay, because he didn't have any servants.
Yeah.
So Tagore admits him, and Decker enters, leaving the door ajar behind him.
They start talking about their current work and how cool science is. And Decker calls it a godlike power. And you can see that he really believes this. Tagore asks if Decker has reached the final stage of his experimentation.
I'm not sure what the final stage would be. If there's anything more final than creating a man in a gorilla suit from a chimpanzee.
Decker's not going to admit that yet, but Tagore says that he has reached the final stage, whatever that is. I guess it means you're just about to publish. And Decker grouses that he's not going to let Tagore steal his thunder.
This would have been a really great movie if Tagore had like a man-sized lizard and he and Konga had to fight.
No, a cat.
Anyway, Konga has made his way in and does away with Tagore.
He reaches through some shelves and grabs him by the neck and strangles him. And Konga starts trashing the lab as Decker is stealing Tagore's research off the wall.
Now it's time for a class field trip. All the students are crammed in the back of the van, except for Sandra, who will ride up front with Dr. Decker.
It's interesting that the newsboy didn't announce that Professor Tagore was killed, and it really never gets mentioned again.
Well, he was a foreigner, so they probably didn't care.
Oh, yeah, he did wear a turban, and it was 1960-something. Well, you're right, so it's time for a field trip. The students, including Bob, cram into the back of the van, and they take off. And the other students are razzing Bob because his girl's up front with the professor instead of back with him. And then they all decide to listen to the radio.
Yeah, one of them has a small transistor radio, so they get some tunes going.
Just like you would today, but, you'd use your phone. Up in the front of the van, Decker is talking to Sandra, hoping that they can get some alone time today, while the other students are doing whatever they're supposed to do.
Sandra is not very on the ball.
Well, she didn't agree to the alone time. Out in the field, the students are looking at ferns. Apparently they're amazing. But Bob is glaring at Sandra as she takes notes. Decker sends them all out in different directions to collect their own fern samples, although it is starting to rain.
But Sandra isn't to go out. She's to stay with Decker and prepare questions on ferns.
Bob's not happy about that. He thought they could go out together and, do whatever comes natural.
Bob confronts Sandra and says that he doesn't like Decker's influence on her.
Yeah, he says it's unnatural because he's old enough to be her father.
And she says that her intentions are purely studious.
And also Bob's smothering her.
But she does agree that they can discuss this tonight over a coffee.
He gives her a quick kiss as Decker watches, and then they split up.
Bob joins the others and is mocked.
Poor guy.
The rain is starting to fall much harder, so the kids run to the cabin.
It's like a ranger's shed. And they play some more music.
Yeah, they turn on the radio again, and they start dancing.
And then Decker and Sandra come in, and they're kind of in a clinch. Like, he's holding his coat over her. She's got his arm around him. It looks pretty shady. But the field trip's canceled due to rain, he announces. Decker gives Sandra the key to the van, and all the students run off, but Bob stays behind.
Bob's going to confront Charles about his seeming interest in Sandra.
Yes. It's really inappropriate.
And Bob says as much. And Decker says that his interest in Sandra is purely that of teacher and student.
Right.
And Bob's not buying it.
And they have a slap fight.
It gets a little more intense than that. Bob nearly strangles him.
Right, yeah. Like he's laying on top of him and choking him out. But then cooler heads prevail. Bob apologizes. Decker seemingly accepts it and says that nothing further is going to come from this. Just don't do it again. Keep your mouth shut.
Bob is worried he'll be thrown out of school.
Decker says that we can just pretend it never happened. So later we're at home with Bob and his family. They're serving dinner. Bob sits down to the table, but he's not interested in eating. Once again, he gets mocked, this time by his little brother and his little sister.
Yeah, he comes from a sitcom family.
Yeah, they're concerned that he's really into this girl and she's not serious about him. And Bob's dad tells Bob, you should play it cool. That's how I got your mother.
That's what the Americans would do.
Oh, yeah. Bob actually never ate any dinner, but he has to leave anyways. He has to go meet Sandra. So he goes outside and he's firing up his scooter. I don't know if that's a Vespa, but it's something like that. So it's not very dignified.
He doesn't get too far before Konga jumps from the bushes and mauls Bob.
Oh, this poor guy. Nothing has gone his way this entire movie, and now he's dead. His parents find his body next to his still running scooter as Konga toddles home to Dr. Decker. By this time, the police are there, but they don't spot Konga. They do talk to Bob's mom and dad, though, and mom and dad don't know who would have wanted to hurt Bob. He didn't have any rivals for Sandra that they knew about. So we're back at Scotland Yard. The cops note that there are 3 victims now at this one university. So I guess they did realize that Professor Tagore was dead.
And these victims all have had animal hairs discovered on the victims' bodies. Likely chimpanzee or some similar creature.
Likely a gorilla suit. There are no animals on the loose, though, so they're really baffled.
Now, this is 3 murders, and Margaret is questioning why a boy would have to be killed as part of this experiment.
Yeah, they're eating breakfast, and Decker is coolly sipping his coffee and reading the paper, and Margaret just slaps that paper away from him and asks if he'd like a side of murder with his breakfast.
And Decker reminds her that he has killed no one. It's just part of this experiment, and it's been successful because Konga has obeyed every order that he's been given.
This should horrify Margaret, and it seemingly does initially, but she gets good with it pretty fast.
But she does mention that 3 murders might be a bit much and might arouse suspicion.
Yeah, she doesn't want Decker to get caught.
No, because who else is going to marry her?
Yeah, he'll lose everything. She'll lose everything. There's a lot at stake here.
And Decker agrees that the time has come to destroy Konga.
I don't know that she's too happy about that either. But Decker says he has the formulas right, so they don't need him anymore.
Right, they can recreate it if need be.
Make another man in a monkey suit.
Because it's only a matter of time before the police start connecting the dots.
Yeah, he actually plans to return to Uganda with Margaret and set up a new laboratory there.
And to not arouse suspicion, he says that he will attend the boy's funeral and then invite Sandra, the boy's girlfriend, to dinner.
How is that not suspicious? They put off their trip to Uganda for a couple weeks, just, again, to avoid suspicion. So dinner with Sandra is complete, and all three are, Margaret, Sandra, and Decker, are sitting in the parlor chatting.
She doesn't seem too distraught over the death of her supposed boyfriend.
Yeah, didn't this just happen like a few days before? So good old Margaret's going to go do the dishes, leaving Decker and Sandra alone together.
And Decker begins by proclaiming how great a man and scientist he is.
Tells her to forget about Bob. That's in the past.
And he's going to show her some of his work, so he brings her out to the greenhouse.
That is such a classic move. Come with me to my greenhouse. Once in the greenhouse, he shows her his giant beastly plants. One of them actually nips at her, scares her a little bit.
And he tells her to be careful because they are carnivorous now. They were previously insectivorous, but now they're carnivorous and will eat anything that comes into range of them. And these plants also spew acid, so they can eat you even without biting you.
Yeah, lovely, lovely flora. This frightens her. It's also really hot in the greenhouse, and she's getting a little disoriented, I think. Decker says that she should get used to the heat if she's going to be his assistant.
And explains that Margaret, his current assistant, just lacks Sandra's natural skill in botany.
Yeah, Decker says that Margaret's usefulness is coming to an end. He says he needs a young, fresh mind, which has got to hurt for Margaret.
And then he starts to maul her.
Sandra does not welcome his attentions. He's got her in a clinch. He's holding her tight. She's struggling to get away. Margaret, by this time, though, he should bust in and maybe help her, but no.
Now, Margaret realizes that she might be the next to join the conga line.
That is a great way to phrase that.
So she goes inside the conga to strike first.
Yeah, she's going to juice up Konga one last time.
And Sandra is confused by Decker's advances, but she's in enough of her right mind to say no, but that doesn't seem to matter.
No, he continues to assault her. Down in the lab, Margaret is trying to hypnotize Konga to listen to her voice and sort of reprogram him from obeying Decker.
Then she injects him with another dose of the serum, and Margaret sends Konga out to obey her orders.
The assault on Sandra continues in the greenhouse. He's pawing at her. He says he loves her, and she's hot and confused and unhappy and just wants to be left alone.
The serum has caused Konga to grow once more.
He's as tall as a tall ceiling in the laboratory.
He starts to trash the lab, and he sets fire to Dr. Decker's notes.
And then, okay, the special effects are awful. When Konga became this height, it was just as bad as every time before, but now it gets even worse because he picks up Margaret, but then when they pull away, there's a shot of him holding like a tiny rag doll in his hand. And in addition to looking incredibly fake, it's just the wrong size proportion. She should be much bigger in relative proportion.
I don't think any of the proportions are correct for the rest of this movie.
No.
But in their defense, that shot with the doll is only on for less than a second. You're not supposed to be able to notice it.
It's long enough. So he throws the doll on the ground, and then it reverts to being Margaret. She's all broken.
And Konga grows again, and he bursts through the ceiling.
Yeah, like Kool-Aid Man going through the house.
And then through the wall.
Yeah, he turns this house into a pile of rubble in an instant.
In the greenhouse, Decker is still molesting Sandra when Konga breaks through the top of the greenhouse. He puts his hand in there. Sandra escapes, but is caught by one of the carnivorous plants.
Yeah, a Venus flytrap style thing. Grabs her by the arm, and she's stuck there. Whatever happens after that, we don't know. We never see her again.
We can presume she died because of the acidic qualities that these plants...
I feel like maybe it just ate her arm, and she went away one-armed. But it doesn't matter. We'll never know. Decker, on the other hand, gets picked up by Konga.
And up till now, Konga has been doing everything that Decker has told him to. So Decker says, "Let me down, you fool."
Right, but he's been reprogrammed, so he's not going to do what he's told, at least not by Decker anymore. Now the fire brigade pulls up to the house, ready to put out the conflagration within.
And they can't help but notice the large gorilla standing next to the building.
Yeah, because I think by now he's like, 20, 30 feet tall?
Scotland Yard is getting calls about this giant gorilla. They take the call and say, "Fantastic! There's a huge monster gorilla that's constantly growing to outlandish proportions loose in the streets. He's moving towards the embankment area." So the police rush towards the embankment area as Konga terrorizes the streets.
Yeah, people are running and screaming in all directions. We do see Konga. He's standing behind, what are obviously flats of buildings like the George Hotel.
It's not a very destructive rampage. He's very careful. He walks around the buildings.
Yeah, he kind of shuffles. We see his feet only walking through town, and he's kind of at a slow shuffle. So I don't know why people are shrieking and screaming. They could easily outrun him.
Konga stops at Big Ben, and the crowd knows he stops, so they stop too because they want to know what he's going to do.
So if you look at the time, it says that it's 11:38, and Konga is just standing there. He's not going to move anymore, and nobody's running anymore. They all just stop to gawk at him.
And the police arrived along with some armed forces, and they can't figure out what to do except to open fire. So they do.
Even though he's holding Decker, Decker's squirming in his grasp and yelling to be put down and saying, "You fool," a lot. But to no avail. He's not going to let him go.
If it was a woman, they would hold fire, trying to think of another way to...
Would they? Maybe back then they would. They wouldn't anymore.
Don't shoot, he's holding a man.
Don't shoot, he's holding a white man.
So they open fire. Most of the shots seem to go over Konga's head, so this actually goes on for quite a while.
Right.
While they're doing all this shooting, most of it is going over Konga's head. One seems to strike the clock tower, and everything else is a miss.
At some point, he throws Decker to the streets where he lays like a broken doll. He's dead, finally. The clock now says midnight, and they finally score enough hits to bring Konga down. But on his way down, somehow he's reverted to the chimp he was at the beginning of the movie.
And everyone stares in disbelief.
Yeah, he's dead on the pavement. He's also a doll here. They didn't actually kill a chimp for this movie, thank goodness. And that's it. That's the end.
And that's Konga. Welcome back to the American International Podcast. On this episode, we are discussing Konga from 1961.
So this was filmed in London in April 1960. It followed the success of Herman Cohen's previous British-made film Horrors of the Black Museum, and that also featured Michael Gough.
And was also released domestically by American International Pictures.
It was released on a double feature in America with Master of the World, which was a Vincent Price movie. Now, Cohen wrote this. He had admired the movie King Kong. He liked it so much that he actually bought the rights to the picture in order to use it in the marketing for Konga. The original working title of this movie was I Was a Teenage Gorilla.
It sounds ridiculous, but if you look at it closely, it's not that far off. This movie follows basically the same formula as I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Right, but it's not told from the point of view of the gorilla. The gorilla is just kind of a device that...
Right. If Konga was one of the teenagers, it would be the exact same movie.
It's true. But they did find that the I Was a Teenage ... formula had kind of been played out by then, and they opted not to go that way. Now, as we said before, Paul Stockman was the man inside the ape suit. In an interview, he said that he came to get the part of Konga because his agent said there was an American producer looking for a 6-foot actor. Asked him to go to Mac's rehearsal room in Leicester Square, London. He goes in the room and there's 20 other 6-foot tall guys there. And he thought, oh, wow, it's a lineup. So Herman Cohen comes in carrying a big cardboard box saying, the actor I need must be exactly 6 feet tall. So if you're 6'1", 5'11", thank you for coming, but you should go home. So now there's 2 or 3 other guys there, and they open the cardboard box, and it's a gorilla headpiece. And they make all 3 of them try it on. And the reason that he was picked is because he had brown eyes, and the other 2 had blue eyes, and they needed a brown-eyed gorilla. So that's how history was made here.
The suit in question was owned by Gorilla Man George Barrows. Now, George Barrows had played Roman in Robot Monster using the same suit, minus the gorilla headpiece.
So how did Paul Stockman end up in the costume instead of George?
The production had enough to rent the gorilla suit, but not enough to rent George Barrows, so they just rented the suit. It was shipped to London, and they shot their masterpiece and sent it back in a wreck.
No way. I hope they didn't get their deposit back. When they were filming the movie, they spent about 5 or 6 nights just shooting people running around the streets, screaming and running in all directions. And then on the last night, they filmed the scene where Konga was killed, and the noise that they made, I guess it would be fake artillery fire, scared people so much that they were actually calling into Scotland Yard for real, thinking that there was some attack going on.
When this movie was released, AIP recommended that theater owners schedule a showing for monkeys and apes in a zoo or in a pet store and invite the press to come and cover the proceedings.
I don't know if that ever happened. I feel like we would have heard something about monkeys being shown a movie, and I'm not sure how that would actually get butts in seats. It didn't really help with the reviews, though. The New York Times called it nothing more than an overblown King Kong with a lead heavily played by Michael Gough and an improbable-looking ape. And in Time Out, it was called inept, silly, but ludicrously enjoyable. And it wasn't the end of the Konga story. There actually was a novelization of the film written by Dean Owen that included gratuitous sexual scenarios that weren't related to the film at all. And also, from 1960 to 1965, Charlton Comics published 23 issues of a book called Konga, which included work by Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko. And Konga returned in a 3-issue miniseries that started off as The Return of Konga before it was renamed Konga's Revenge. And that ran from 1962 to 1964. Jess Conrad, who was Bob, was scheduled to sing a song in this film, but it got cut. So I guess they were still sort of in their let's throw in a musical number for the teens phase.
Yeah, I believe Jess Conrad was a British pop star at the time.
I'll have to look that up and see if I like any of his music. All right, Jeff, how would you rate Konga on our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
This is a tough one because this movie is so over-the-top goofy, but it's also so much fun that I have to give it an A for awesome.
Oh, really?
This is probably Michael Gough's greatest performance in any film. It's
even better than when he was Alfred in the Batman movies?
That was so subdued in comparison. But every time I see him now, I just shout, "You fool!"
Anytime I see a giant monkey, I shout, "You fool!"
There are absolutely no likable characters in this movie whatsoever.
No, there aren't. There's no one to root for. Maybe Sandra. She's sort of a pawn in this.
Sandra's kind of stupid, though. She's very oblivious to everything going on around her.
Well, what about Bob? Bob didn't deserve anything that happened to him. He was just a teenage boy with hormones.
Yeah, but he's pretty pathetic, too.
You're so harsh.
I mean, it's obvious why Sandra's not interested in him. He seems a little desperate.
A little doofy, too. Maybe if he had sung to her, maybe he could have won her heart.
But yeah, I'm going to give this film an A for awesome. You've got a guy in a gorilla suit. That's always a plus in a movie. This guy in the gorilla suit grows to outlandish proportions. That's another plus. He goes on a rampage of London that isn't much of a rampage. Okay, that might not be a plus, but we get to see the clock tower. Parliament's nowhere around, but there's towers right there. And it's just a lot of fun. You're never bored watching this. You loathe Dr. Decker in every scene he's in, and you'd learn to loathe everybody else through him. I mean, really, if there's any likable character in here, it might be the Dean.
Oh, that poor guy, too. He did have a point. Decker was unhinged and not just temporarily deranged, he was just permanently deranged.
So Michael Gough's greatest role to see him play one of the worst human beings in the history of the world is just so much. This movie is so much fun, and I can't recommend it enough.
I'm going to rate it. We don't really do like A- or whatever, but it's almost an A for me. But it's just the parts that you liked, the giant monkey and the London tourism and all that comes at the very end of the movie. And up until then, it's kind of a talky boring slog to get there, where we have to watch Decker become more and more unhinged and more drunk with power and more murderous as we go on. And yeah, Michael Gough is great in this role, but you'll absolutely hate him from the first moment you meet him. And Margaret, the supposed conscience, really just caves so quickly when it comes to not wanting to lose her comfortable position. So she's almost worse than him because she could pull the reins in on him and have the cops come. She could have saved Bob. She could have saved Professor Tagore, and she couldn't have saved the dean. So I think she's almost worse for not doing anything in order to keep her cushy job and her almost marriage. And I think I'm a little nicer to Bob and Sandra than you are. They're just kids and they don't deserve what happens to them. Whatever happened to Sandra, we never know. But I think the worst part is the special effects. They're just terrible. And maybe if they sort of remade this movie, not from scratch, but they just sort of redid the special effects a la George Lucas redoing Star Wars movies. If they made those just a little bit more believable and a little less cringingly awful, I think I would give it an A. But for now, I'm going to stick with I.
Well, I think the special effects are part of the charm of this movie. That's one of the things that boosted it up to an A for me. Not because they're good, they're not, but because they're fun to look at.
I don't know. They're fun. They made me laugh, I guess, if that's what you consider fun. But I just think that there had to be a better way to accomplish that. I would even prefer that they did it off screen rather than making us watch this very, very silly transformation from a chimp into a gorilla-suited man. Chimps can't turn into gorillas, and there's nothing you can do to make that happen. No science exists. Not then, not now. So I guess I'm stuck on that. So I it is for me.
I don't think good effects would save this movie.
Well, you love it.
I don't think good effects would improve it. I think it would just make the rest of the movie seem poorer in comparison.
Yeah, I suppose you have a point.
And you say that the movie's talky, but because it's Michael Gough doing what he's doing, it's enjoyable. If anybody else was in this, I don't think I would enjoy this movie as much. I can't imagine anybody else going off the rail. If they put Vincent Price in this movie...
Oh, he couldn't do it.
No, because he would have had too much fun being evil, and he would have been over the top.
And you would love him for it.
You would love him for it. But Michael Gough, you don't love him for it, and he's over the top for him, but it's not for the role.
No, I understand that. I just say it's talky because I was taking notes on this and had to keep pausing the movie to write down what was happening because it was all conversation. So maybe that's just, my note-taking perspective. The first time we watched this was a long time ago, and I didn't have as many issues with it as I did when I looked at it more critically. So don't watch it critically. Just watch it for fun.
And this movie has so many great lines that we just brushed over, besides the constant mention of "you fool."
I love it when Konga's still a chimp, and Decker tells Margaret, "Please leave. I want to be alone with Konga."
Or, "I can't stand hysterics, especially in the morning."
He's maddeningly cool to her when she's trying to get upset, and that makes her even angrier.
See, this movie is just so much fun.
He's diabolical.
I guess it's going to wrap it up for this episode of the American International Podcast.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.